In Part 1, the investigation reached a critical turning point. Detectives no longer believed they were searching for a missing person, they believed they were investigating a murder. But believing Lisa Dorrian had been killed was one thing. Proving it would become one of the greatest challenges in the history of the case. This is Part 2. Remarks made in private sometimes reach investigators years later. The police urged anyone carrying such knowledge to come forward, assuring the public that even information that seemed insignificant could help establish what had happened. Lisa's family echoed those appeals. They understood that someone had been with Lisa during her final hours. Someone had seen something. Someone knew what happened after the party ended. Their message remained remarkably consistent throughout the years. If fear was preventing witnesses from speaking, they pleaded with them to consider the suffering endured by a family left without answers. As time passed, rumors spread throughout parts of County Down. Some suggested that Lisa had been involved in an accident that had been concealed. Others claimed she had been deliberately murdered. There were stories about vehicles, about movements during the night, and about people behaving suspiciously after the disappearance. Many of these accounts circulated within the community, but rumors alone could never form the basis of a criminal prosecution. Detectives had to separate fact from speculation. Every allegation required verification. Many were investigated and ultimately discounted because they could not be supported by evidence. Others remained part of the broader intelligence picture but were never publicly confirmed by police. This careful approach reflected the challenges of the case. Investigators could not rely on gossip or assumptions. They needed admissible evidence. As the years passed, the absence of such evidence became increasingly frustrating, not only for detectives but also for Lisa's family, who watched countless theories emerge while the central mystery remained unresolved. Still, police refused to abandon the investigation. Behind closed doors, officers continued gathering intelligence, reassessing witness statements, and monitoring new information as it emerged. Then, several years after Lisa disappeared, the investigation took an extraordinary turn. Rather than waiting for witnesses to volunteer the truth, detectives decided to pursue a far more covert strategy. It was an operation that would reportedly capture conversations unlike anything previously obtained in the case. Conversations that investigators believe brought them closer than ever to understanding what had happened during Lisa Dorrian's final hours. For the first time, the silence surrounding the case appeared to crack. But proving what those conversations meant inside a court of law would become an entirely different challenge. Several years into the investigation, the disappearance of Lisa Dorrian entered a new and highly significant phase. Despite hundreds of witness interviews, repeated searches, and years of investigative work, detectives still lacked the one piece of evidence that could conclusively explain what had happened on the night of February 27, 2005. Lisa had never been found. Without her remains, establishing exactly how she died or where remained extraordinarily difficult. Yet behind the scenes, investigators were continuing to gather intelligence. They had not abandoned the case, and they believed that time might succeed where early interviews had failed. Experience had taught detectives that people often become more willing to speak as years pass. Friendships fade, loyalties shift, and conversations once thought to be private can eventually reach the police. It was within this context that investigators launched one of the most unusual operations connected to the case. In 2012, officers from the Police Service of Northern Ireland carried out a covert surveillance operation designed to obtain information from individuals they believed possessed knowledge about Lisa's disappearance. As part of that operation, conversations were secretly recorded. The existence of those recordings would later become public and dramatically change how the investigation was viewed. According to investigators, the recordings captured discussions that appeared to acknowledge Lisa's death and the concealment of her body. The details of the conversations have never been fully released to the public, and much of the material remains subject to legal restrictions. However, police have stated that the recordings formed a significant part of their belief that Lisa had been murdered shortly after she disappeared. The covert operation represented a major development. For years, detectives had suspected that multiple people knew what had happened. Now they believed they had obtained conversations that supported that conclusion. Although investigators have never publicly disclosed every person involved in the recordings, the operation reinforced their view that Lisa's disappearance was not an unexplained missing person case, but a deliberate homicide. The recordings also strengthened another long-held belief within the investigation. Police suspected that more than one individual had knowledge of the crime. If Lisa had been killed and her body concealed, detectives believed it would likely have required cooperation, or at the very least, silence, from others aware of what had occurred. This theory helped explain why the investigation had reached so many dead ends despite years of public appeals. Investigators increasingly concluded that fear, loyalty, or both were preventing crucial witnesses from telling the full truth. Yet even with the covert recordings, the case remained legally complex. Evidence gathered during undercover operations must satisfy strict legal standards before it can be relied upon in criminal proceedings. Detectives still faced the challenge of corroborating what had been captured with independent evidence that could withstand scrutiny in court. Without Lisa's body, there remained fundamental questions that the recordings alone could not answer. Where had the killing taken place? Where had Lisa been taken afterward? Could forensic evidence still be recovered after so many years? The investigation, therefore, entered another phase. Rather than relying solely on witness testimony, detectives began pursuing fresh searches based on intelligence developed during the inquiry. Over the following years, officers would examine multiple locations across County Down, including farmland and other rural sites believed to hold potential significance. Specialist search teams used modern investigative techniques in the hope that advances in forensic science might succeed where earlier efforts had failed. Each search attracted widespread public attention. Each raised renewed hope that Lisa might finally be found. Each ended without the breakthrough her family so desperately sought. The covert recordings also became the subject of intense public discussion. Many observers believed they represented the strongest indication yet that investigators knew far more than had been revealed publicly. Others questioned whether the material on its own would ever be enough to secure convictions. Police themselves remained measured in their public statements. They did not claim the recordings solved the case. Instead, they emphasized that the investigation remained active and that they continued to seek additional evidence capable of confirming what they believed had happened. For Lisa's family, the revelations brought mixed emotions. On one hand, the recordings appeared to validate what they had long feared, that Lisa had not simply vanished but had been killed. On the other, they offered no certainty about where she was. Without the recovery of her remains, the family remained trapped in a painful state of uncertainty. They still had no grave to visit, no final opportunity to lay Lisa to rest, no complete account of her final moments. The covert operation had brought detectives closer to the truth than ever before, but it had also revealed the limits of even the most sophisticated investigation. Knowing that a crime had likely occurred was not the same as proving it beyond reasonable doubt, and until investigators could bridge that gap, the central objective of the case remained unchanged. Find Lisa, identify everyone responsible, and provide her family with the answers they had waited years to hear. Those objectives would continue to drive the investigation as detectives pursued new searches, re-examined old evidence, and renewed their appeals to a public they believed still held the missing pieces of one of Northern Ireland's most enduring mysteries. By the time the investigation entered its second decade, the disappearance of Lisa Dorrian had become one of the longest-running and most resource-intensive missing person inquiries in Northern Ireland. Although detectives had grown increasingly convinced that Lisa had been murdered, proving that belief in a court of law remained an entirely different challenge. Without the discovery of her remains, investigators continued to face a fundamental obstacle. There was no crime scene that could be fully reconstructed, no forensic examination of Lisa herself, and no definitive physical evidence capable of explaining precisely how she died or where her body had been taken. Despite these challenges, the investigation never stood still. Over the years, the Police Service of Northern Ireland repeatedly returned to County Down, acting on fresh intelligence, reassessing old information, and following up on new leads. Search teams revisited rural farmland, isolated buildings, stretches of coastline, and other locations identified through witness statements or information received from confidential sources. Many of these operations involve specialist officers trained in forensic searches. Ground-penetrating equipment, excavation techniques, and carefully coordinated search methods were employed wherever detectives believed there was a realistic possibility of locating evidence. Each operation required extensive planning. Large areas of land had to be secured, examined methodically, and documented before investigators could determine whether anything of evidential value had been recovered. Every new search generated renewed hope. For Lisa's family, each announcement carried the possibility that, after years of uncertainty, they might finally learn where she had been hidden. For the wider public, every search served as a reminder that the investigation remained active and that detectives had not abandoned the case. Yet time after time, the searches concluded without recovering Lisa's remains. The absence of a breakthrough was devastating. Still, investigators insisted that unsuccessful searches did not necessarily invalidate the intelligence that had prompted them. Information received years after a crime can be incomplete or based on imperfect recollections. Landscapes also change over time. Buildings are demolished, farmland is altered, and natural processes can significantly affect the preservation and location of evidence. As a result, detectives continue to evaluate every credible lead rather than relying on any single theory. Alongside the physical searches, police also continued pursuing individuals they believed might possess important information. Over the years, several people were arrested in connection with the investigation. These arrests reflected detectives' belief that there were individuals whose actions or knowledge required further examination. However, under the criminal justice system, an arrest is an investigative step, not proof of guilt. Each suspect was questioned under caution while officers assessed the available evidence. Investigators explored inconsistencies in witness accounts, examined intelligence gathered throughout the inquiry, and sought opportunities to corroborate information obtained during previous investigations. Despite these efforts, the evidential threshold required for prosecution remained exceptionally high. In a homicide case without a body, prosecutors must still establish beyond reasonable doubt that a murder occurred and that the accused was responsible. Suspicion, intelligence, or even strongly held investigative beliefs cannot replace admissible evidence capable of supporting a conviction. As a consequence, several arrests did not result in criminal charges. In other instances, individuals were released pending further investigation while detectives continued pursuing additional evidence. This legal reality became one of the defining frustrations of the entire case. Investigators publicly stated that they believed they knew far more about Lisa's disappearance than they could prove. For Lisa's family, that distinction was heartbreaking. Hearing that detectives believed they understood what had happened offered some validation that the case had not been forgotten. But belief alone could not deliver justice. Without sufficient evidence, no trial could proceed. The years also brought important developments in forensic science. Advances in search technology and investigative techniques encouraged police to revisit evidence that had been collected years earlier. Detectives remained hopeful that modern methods, or new witness testimony, might succeed where earlier investigative efforts had fallen short. This determination led to further searches at locations linked to information gathered during the investigation. Each new operation demonstrated that the passage of time had not diminished the commitment to solving the case. Senior investigators repeatedly emphasized that they continued to receive information from members of the public. Some tips were entirely new. Others expanded upon intelligence that had been gathered years before. Every credible report was assessed. Every potential witness was considered. Police consistently urged anyone with knowledge of Lisa's disappearance to come forward, stressing that loyalties and fears that may have existed in 2005 no longer needed to dictate the future. Detectives believed there were still people carrying information that had never been shared. Perhaps someone had witnessed something they did not fully understand at the time. Perhaps someone had been told the truth in confidence years later. Or perhaps someone who had remained silent out of fear now felt able to speak. For Lisa's family, those appeals represented more than an investigative strategy. They represented hope. Hope that one conversation, one admission, or one forgotten detail might finally lead detectives to Lisa and provide the answers they had sought for so many years. By the end of the investigation's second decade, countless hours of police work had been devoted to the case. Hundreds of witnesses had been interviewed, numerous searches had been carried out, multiple arrests had been made. Yet despite all of that effort, no one had been convicted for Lisa Dorrian's disappearance, and her remains had still not been found. The investigation had reached an extraordinary point. Detectives believed they were pursuing a murder. A family continued to wait for their daughter to come home, and somewhere they believed the final pieces of the truth were still being kept hidden. The next chapter of the case would be defined not by what investigators already knew, but by their determination to uncover the evidence that had eluded them for so long. The passage of time has a way of changing almost every criminal investigation. Witnesses grow older, communities change. Relationships that once seemed unbreakable begin to fade. People who were reluctant to speak years earlier sometimes find the courage to come forward. For detectives investigating Lisa Dorrian's disappearance, the passing years were never viewed as a reason to close the case. Instead, they represented new opportunities to revisit evidence, reassess old assumptions, and pursue fresh lines of inquiry. The Police Service of Northern Ireland repeatedly emphasized that Lisa's case remained an active murder investigation. Specialist detectives continued reviewing witness statements collected over many years, comparing them with intelligence received more recently, and examining whether advances in forensic science could assist where earlier methods had been unsuccessful. Rather than treating the investigation as a cold case, officers approached it as a living inquiry, one capable of progressing whenever credible new information emerged. One of the defining features of these renewed investigations was the willingness to revisit locations that had already been searched. To some observers, returning to the same areas might have appeared repetitive. To experienced investigators, it reflected an important reality. Searches are guided by the quality of available intelligence. When new information becomes available, even a location examined years earlier can warrant another careful inspection using improved techniques and equipment. Throughout the years, police carried out additional searches at sites across County Down linked to information received during the investigation. Although these operations attracted considerable public attention, none resulted in the discovery of Lisa's remains. Even so, detectives maintained that every search contributed to the wider investigation by either uncovering new evidence or eliminating potential locations. Alongside these investigative efforts came a series of renewed public appeals. Senior officers repeatedly addressed the media, urging anyone with knowledge of Lisa's disappearance to come forward. Their message evolved over time. Rather than focusing solely on those who had attended the party in February 2005, detectives appealed to anyone who may have learned information afterward. They acknowledged that people often carry secrets for years before deciding to speak. Some individuals may have overheard conversations. Others may have been privately confided in by someone directly involved. Police believed that even a seemingly insignificant detail could provide the missing link needed to move the investigation forward. Investigators also recognized that circumstances change. Someone who feared speaking in 2005 might no longer feel the same pressure decades later. Friendships end, families grow apart, influence diminishes. The passage of time can weaken the forces that once kept people silent. This belief became central to the PSNI's continuing appeals. Detectives consistently stated that they believed there were individuals who still knew what had happened to Lisa. They urged those people to consider the suffering endured by her family and to help bring an end to years of uncertainty. Lisa's family never stopped making their own appeals. Despite living with unanswered questions for more than 2 decades, they remained determined to keep Lisa's name in the public eye. Every anniversary of her disappearance became another opportunity to remind people that the investigation remained unresolved. They spoke not with anger, but with hope. Hope that someone carrying the burden of the truth would finally choose compassion over silence. Their message was remarkably consistent. If anyone knew where Lisa was, they asked only that her remains be returned. The family emphasized that recovering Lisa would allow them to give her the dignity of a proper funeral and provide a place where they could grieve. For them, bringing Lisa home had become just as important as securing a criminal conviction. Police also continued to encourage anonymous reporting. Recognizing that fear or loyalty might still prevent some witnesses from identifying themselves publicly, investigators reminded the public that information could be provided confidentially through established reporting channels. No piece of information was considered too small, a forgotten conversation, an unusual journey, a remark made years ago. Any detail detectives believed could become significant when combined with evidence already gathered during the investigation. The enduring nature of Lisa's case also highlighted broader changes in modern policing. Advances in forensic science, digital evidence analysis, and intelligence management have transformed how long-term investigations are conducted. Cases once thought impossible to solve have, in many parts of the world, been reopened and resolved decades later because of new technology or newly available evidence. That reality has continued to give investigators hope. Senior officers have repeatedly stated that they remain committed to pursuing every credible lead, regardless of how much time has passed. For them, there is no expiration date on justice. As the years have gone by, Lisa Dorrian's disappearance has come to symbolize more than a single criminal investigation. It has become a reminder of the profound impact unresolved cases have on families. When a loved one disappears without explanation, grief does not follow a normal path. Instead, it exists alongside uncertainty. Every unanswered question prolongs the search for closure. Every passing year becomes another reminder of what has been lost. Today, detectives remain convinced that the truth has not disappeared. They believe it still exists within the memories of people who have remained silent for far too long. Somewhere, someone knows where Lisa was taken, someone knows what happened after the party ended, and someone possesses the information capable of bringing this investigation to its conclusion. Whether that person will ever choose to speak remains one of the final unanswered questions in one of Northern Ireland's most enduring mysteries. After more than 2 decades, the search continues, not simply for evidence, but for truth, accountability, and the opportunity to finally bring Lisa Dorrian home. More than 2 decades have passed since Lisa Dorrian was last seen walking into a gathering at a remote caravan near Ballyhalbert. The fields have changed. The roads surrounding the property have witnessed countless seasons come and go. People who were young adults in 2005 have grown older, built families, and moved on with their lives. Yet for Lisa's family, time has never truly moved forward. Every year that passes marks another birthday she never celebrated, another family gathering with an empty place, another anniversary filled not with memories of closure, but with unanswered questions. Unlike many criminal investigations, Lisa's case has never reached a definitive ending. There has been no courtroom verdict explaining exactly what happened, no complete public account of the events that unfolded during those final hours. And perhaps most painfully of all, Lisa herself has never been found. Despite this, the investigation has achieved something important. Through years of interviews, searches, forensic examinations, intelligence gathering, and covert operations, detectives have steadily refined their understanding of the case. The Police Service of Northern Ireland has repeatedly stated that it believes Lisa was murdered shortly after her disappearance and that there are individuals who know exactly what happened. That position has remained consistent through successive investigative teams. Yet the burden of criminal justice is intentionally high. Investigators may strongly believe they understand a crime, but belief must always be supported by evidence capable of meeting the legal standard required in court. This principle protects every criminal investigation. It also explains why some of the most determined police inquiries can remain unresolved for years. Lisa's disappearance stands as a powerful example of that reality. The absence of a body has never prevented detectives from treating the case as a suspected murder, but it has made every stage of the investigation significantly more complex. Without definitive forensic evidence from the victim herself, investigators have been forced to rely on witness testimony, intelligence, circumstantial evidence, and painstaking investigative work carried out over many years. For Lisa's family, however, the case has never been defined by legal terminology. To them, it has always been about one young woman who left home expecting to return, a daughter, a sister, a loved one whose future was abruptly taken away. Throughout the investigation, they have demonstrated remarkable resilience. Rather than allowing Lisa's disappearance to fade from public memory, they have continued to speak about her, participate in appeals, and encourage anyone with information to come forward. Their determination has ensured that Lisa's name remains known across Northern Ireland, even after more than 20 years. It is a reminder that unresolved cases are not measured solely by police files or court proceedings. They are measured by the lives left permanently changed. For investigators, Lisa Dorrian's case has also become an enduring lesson in persistence. Major investigations rarely follow a straight path. They demand patience, constant reassessment, and the willingness to revisit evidence long after public attention has shifted elsewhere. Each renewed search, each witness interview, and each forensic review reflects a simple belief shared by experienced detectives around the world. As long as unanswered questions remain, the investigation is not truly over. History has shown that some of the world's most challenging criminal cases have eventually been solved decades after the crimes occurred. Advances in forensic science, renewed witness cooperation, and previously unknown evidence have transformed investigations once believed impossible to resolve. That possibility continues to offer hope in Lisa's case. Detectives have consistently maintained that they remain ready to act on credible new information no matter how much time has passed. For anyone who possesses knowledge about Lisa's disappearance, the passage of years does not diminish the value of the truth. In fact, it may make that truth more important than ever. A single conversation, a forgotten detail, a decision to finally speak. Any one of these could become the missing piece that investigators have searched for since February 2005. Until that day arrives, Lisa Dorrian's disappearance remains one of Northern Ireland's most enduring, unsolved murder investigations. It is a case defined not only by mystery, but also by perseverance. By detectives who have refused to abandon the search, by a family that has never stopped hoping, and by the belief that somewhere the answers still exist. If there is one lasting lesson to be drawn from Lisa's story, it is that silence can preserve uncertainty for years, but it cannot erase the truth. Eventually, evidence is discovered. Memories resurface, consciences change. Whether that moment comes tomorrow or years from now, Lisa's family continues to hope that one day they will finally receive the answers they have sought for so long. Until then, the mystery of Lisa Dorrian remains unfinished, not because investigators stopped searching, not because her family stopped believing, but because the final chapter of her story has yet to be written. And somewhere in Northern Ireland, that final chapter is still waiting to be told. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing for more carefully researched true crime stories based on verified facts, court records, and official investigations. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember that the most unsettling mysteries are often the ones hidden in plain sight.